Welcome back to CTV News. Well, is it too good to be true? A bunch of councillors say we don't need to sell anything, we don't need to sell off our assets. This can be done in other ways. It is our lead story tonight, and joining us in the studio is from the People's Choice, Andrew Turner. Good to have you here. So you released a plan essentially saying you don't need to sell your assets, we can reduce our debt quite phenomenally. Talk us through the need to do this now. Why now? Why not before, when the consultations was happening around the table with the other councillors?
Well, this is a piece of work that's taken some time to put together. It's also, the whole thing has been an iterative process, I guess, as well. You know, there have been two council resolutions around the sale of assets, one in December, one more recently, and we're now getting to a point where, of course, the draft long-term plan is out for consultation, and it's important that all options are put on the table so that people do have access to the information that they need to make good quality submissions and to be able to be intelligently involved in the process.
So let's talk about the options that the People's Choice have raised today. What are the fundamental main options that you think can save this city a lot of money?
So at a high level, we've got a consultation document which has been put out by the council, which largely has a capital programme which is taken as read. It's there, and that's the basis of the plan. And the question really is, how are we going to pay for the work that needs to be done? We've taken a different view of this. We're actually looking at the size of the shopping list and saying, is there something we can do to actually reduce the size of the shopping list so that the funding requirement can also be reduced? So the debate so far has really been framed as, do we sell assets or do we raise rates? We're adding a different component to that debate to a far greater degree than it's been put out so far, which is, do we actually defer some of these capital projects? In fact, are there some that we don't do at all, so that we reduce the need for such a high level of funding?
I've gone through the shopping list, so to speak. Give us some of the main items, or give us some of the main expenditure you think we can cut, that we can get rid of, the nice to haves but the things we don't need at the moment. And we'll talk about the stadium later on, but I want to get to some of the other issues though. What else is in that shopping list you believe the council hasn't taken a harder look at?
All right, well, there are all manner of things that we need to be looking at there. Council's ability to deliver the projects that it's got on budget within the timeframes is certainly one area that we want to look at. There are the central city roading projects in the Accessible Cities Plan that you were talking about in your previous news item. We need to look at maybe reprioritising some of those, and perhaps reprioritising some of those against the need for some more work to be done more quickly in the suburbs. So this is really around prioritising items within budget, and it may be that things get pushed out. There are some things that don't get done at all, and of course for every capital expenditure item that gets deferred, then the cost of borrowing to fund that item is also pushed out or is reduced, and if there's an operational expense, once the capital asset is completed, that operating expense is also pushed out. So there are several effects to each of these actions.
Let's talk about one example that Janne Johansson told me a few months ago now that he was concerned about, and that was the upgrading of Kilmore Street. He referred to that, I think, on record now as sort of the gold plating of the central city. What does he mean by that? And obviously that's the same concerns that you have.
That's right. I mean, if we look at an accessible city, there are some projects in there, I'm sure, that tie in with the Accessible Cities Phase 1, which is rolling out at the moment. There are some projects in there which relate to cycleways and walking and road safety and all manner of things that we would all support. But there are projects in there
that are vital and not so vital.
Exactly.
And I think you're right to say that, because when I look at your plan, there's one thing that I noticed there. We have some so-called Dutch expert that comes out and says, no, forget the cycleways, you need this and that, and all of a sudden that increases the costs phenomenally. I mean, it's all very well to get the experts from overseas to tell us what we should and shouldn't have, but in a city that's fundamentally broke, that's essentially part of the issue you're getting at, isn't it? That it's all very well to have the experts coming here and telling us we need the gold-plated cycleways, but unless we've got the cash that goes with it, we're dreaming.
Yeah, I mean, great to be taking advice, but everything that we're doing needs to be affordable. And as I said earlier, the size of the shopping list needs to be dictated by the size of the budget, not the other way round.
Now, there's been a lot of conjecture, a lot of contentious issues regarding this blimmin' stadium. Now, my understanding was it has already been deferred way out to 2025. So what are the People's Choice on about then?
So the stadium is on budget at the moment. It's in the long-term plan. I've fronted 4 of the council's long-term plan public meetings in the last few weeks, and one of the things that's come up consistently at each each of those meetings, and I understand at other meetings right the way across the city, is this question about the stadium, which has been live for some time. I mean, I remember at the annual plan last year hearing a lot about the stadium and its need for deferral and so on.
Should we dump it then completely?
It needs to be pushed out further. It doesn't need to be done so soon. So this is one that we would need to defer. There are other considerations
because despite the fact it has been deferred to 2025, it is still part of the plan, isn't it? So this is still, the costs are still there, no matter whether you defer it to 2080.
Yeah, but again, with those considerations around borrowing requirements and so on.
We've got to go. Andrew Turner, thanks for coming to CTV News. And of course, Andrew Turner will be returning to CTV's Lynch programme next week. We will have more time to flesh out those important issues. And what you do need to know is public consultation on the Council's long-term plan ends in just over a week. Andrew Turner, as I say, will be back on Lynched next Monday.